first ride with these Carapaks pegs. I don't know if I like them as much for this kind of stuff, because you feel like you have a little less control of the front end, especially when really cruising through some of the tighter stuff. But we'll see how they do on the hill climbs. You definitely feel, so these are 5 down, 5 back pegs, and you definitely feel more balanced. We rode around the campsite a little bit, just doing some circles, and something that's immediately noticeable, how much more balanced you are. It's easier to balance. We'll see how they climb. So you definitely feel a little bit more, like the back end feels more planted. I'm on this kind of bullshit tire, and it makes it way easier to climb stuff. Alright guys, so here are my initial impressions of these Carapaks 5 down, 5 back foot pegs. We've done about 26 or so miles. We're almost done with our little loop here. Yesterday I rode all day on stock pegs, and this morning I put the Carapaks on just to do kind of a back-to-back. Same trail, same bike, everything's the same. So what do I like about them? Immediately you notice that it's easier to balance. Just doing a little bit of like circles and stuff in a campsite, it is very obvious that it is easier to balance a bike. You can static balance much easier. So that is definitely a thing. These pegs are, they're not really longer, but they are definitely wider, and the teeth are sharper than the stock pegs. So going back and forth between my bike and Jay's bike, which is a KTM with stock pegs, you definitely notice that the stock pegs are much narrower. You feel like you're standing on like a much smaller foot peg. You feel a lot more through the boot. So there's actually more pressure on your foot, interestingly. And you don't feel quite as locked in. It's not bad. I actually really like the stock KTM pegs, and I run them on everything. But the amount of grip is very noticeable on these pegs. We did some hill climbs, we did some kind of techie ledges and stuff, and you're really, really locked in. You can just, especially when things get a little more vertical, you feel very, very locked in. As by vertical, I mean your bike is up and down on like a steep climb, or if you hit a ledge, you feel very locked in. You don't feel like you're going to slide off backwards, which is very helpful. There is a lot more rear traction. I'm on a very, very worn out tire, riding in this kind of loose, sandy stuff, and I was really struggling yesterday, and I am not struggling as nearly as much today, and especially on the any sort of sticks or rocks or anything like that. The bike doesn't deflect sideways nearly as much as it did yesterday. So that's a huge plus. And I think that's primarily what these are intended for, because that's what you want in a hard enduro situation, is some more grip on the rear of the bike. So one concern that I had, and a lot of people have, is the fact that if you put lower pegs, you're going to hit everything. So these are 5 millimeters lower, and so far I haven't noticed that I hit stuff more. And this trail is, you know, the camera probably flattens it, but it's like a trench. So there's a lot of rocks and stumps and stuff on the side of the trail, and I haven't hit anything so far. So I wouldn't say that that's going to be a worry for me. Now, the other aspect aspect that I was kind of worried about is the control feel, because you're moving your pegs down and a little further back. And I'd say it's actually a little bit easier to shift because you can get your foot under the shifter. And the brake is fine. I haven't adjusted anything. I will probably move the brake pedal down a little bit, but it doesn't make a big enough difference that you really, I think, need to worry about the position of the controls. If anything, it might give you a little more room to maneuver around the controls. Installation was pretty easy, like it's the same as any foot pegs. That it's kind of a pain in the butt, but you've got a technique and kind of a couple tools, it's actually not bad. Nothing special about these versus a normal foot peg. Alright, so we talked quite a bit about the pros. Now let's talk about the downsides of these pegs and why I would probably not recommend, if you're just a trail rider or you ride single track, I would not recommend these. Frankly, I would just run stock pegs. That's what I would personally do based on my initial impressions. And the reason is because when you take grip, or when you add grip to the rear, you're doing it at the expense of grip in the front. And the front of the bike is noticeably less nimble. So if you're really cooking the beans and you're zigzagging through the trees, it's just not quite as responsive, and you have to use a lot of body English to get the bike. Maybe not a lot, maybe that's not a fair assessment, but you have to use more. Like, I definitely have to trail brake a little more, and I have to lean the bike a little harder for it to really turn. I just rode Jay's bike, and you can just pitch that in effortlessly. And my bike now with these pegs, it definitely takes a little bit more effort. In some ways it's nice because it's a little bit more stable in certain situations. Like if the trail is relatively smooth, it's more stable. If it's really bumpy, it is actually, I think, a little bit less stable. But you can, I don't know if you can see on camera, but I'm really leaning the bike into the corners because that's now how I have to turn it. And it's fine, you just got to ride a little differently. So yeah, basically if I were just riding normal enduros, if I was now doing hard enduro where I really needed that rear wheel traction and to try to keep the front wheel super light, I would just run stock pegs and enjoy the really nice front end feel. Because really what you're doing with these is you're upsetting the balance of the bike. So yeah guys, if you have any other questions about these pegs, let me know. I'm gonna keep using them, keep testing them, and yeah, leave a comment below, let me know what you think.